To ensure that we have enough time for the Q&A at the end, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar Wednesday. Today is SmartMount2025, Fiber at the Intersection. My name is Kristen Bridgers. I'm part of the marketing team here at GRIDSMART. I will be moderating today's webinar. All that means is that I'll be fielding any questions that you might have to our presenter and panelists, and I'll be keeping track of and managing our time today. Our presenter is Carl Shaw. Carl is Senior Director at GRIDSMART and has been an integral part in the development and implementation of SmartMount 2025. Along with Carl, we have panelists from partner companies who will be available to answer questions. We have Derek Johnson from EtherWAN, who specializes in connectivity. We also have Michael Olson from AFL, who is an expert in all things fiber optics. And lastly, we have GRIDSMART's own Matt Garino, who leads our field services team. Should you have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A feature. You can find the Q&A feature in the control bar at the bottom of your screen. Simply click Q&A, a window will open, type your question, and one of the members of our panel will type the answer, or your question will be answered aloud at the conclusion of the presentation. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Carl to get started. Carl?
Greetings, everybody. Thank you for taking time to attend this webinar. Before we get into the fiber and the fiber technology GRIDSMART implemented, I'd like to define a term I'll be using a lot called a closed system. In this application, or closed system in general, is when the environment does not affect the application. In our implementation, we're using the term closed system, means that everything, all the interconnects, all the devices, and everything has been characterized, and it's provided by GRIDSMART. You're not interfacing to any third-party devices of any kind. So that's pretty important, because I'll be using the term closed system a lot throughout the presentation. It's a little slow here. Give me a second. Sorry. I assume everybody, or hopefully everybody, is familiar with the GRIDSMART system, or at least most people are. Today, what we're going to be talking about, though, is the SmartMount connectivity, which is the interconnect solution between the GS2 processor and the SmartMount bell. With this introduction of fiber, we now have two closed system solutions. We can either do a Cat5e or we can do a fiber. And what this presentation will do, we'll go through the advantages, the technology advantages of fiber in this interconnect closed system solution. It's basically the transmission of digital data or via light or photons on some sort of glass or fiber medium. That's all it is. It's nothing fancy. All you're doing is taking electrical signals and transmitting digital data in a form of light or photons. Nothing more than that. So first of all, advantages of fiber versus cable. Like everything else in engineering, it's cost versus performance. What does fiber give you? It gives you much better distance. It gives you, well, basically gives you noise immunity. And finally, it gives you bandwidth or higher bits per second. So those are the advantages. Like anything else, fiber does have a cost, relatively speaking, a higher cost compared to cable. So in fiber, there are two types of technologies, the multi-mode and there's the single mode. One key point is that the multi-mode and single mode are not interchangeable. So why did GRIDSMART use the multi-mode fiber? One, it supports our system requirements. Because we are a closed system, we knew what the distance would be. We knew our IP camera only transmits at 100 megabits per second. So by using multi-mode, we were able to have a lower cost solution fundamentally. But the key is we are multi-mode. You cannot use single mode fiber in a multi-mode environment. So just keep that in mind. So what is a media converter? Basically, a media converter converts the electrical signals into light or into photons, and vice versa. So one of the big difference with media converters with traditional Ethernet technology, auto negotiation is not supported. So fundamentally, that means if your devices are transmitting at 100 megabits, your media converters have to support that. They're not going to auto negotiate between gigabit, 100 megabits, 10 megabits. It's fundamentally, it's not, again, our media converters work at 100 megabits per second. This is a block diagram of the media converter that GRIDSMART developed in conjunction with EtherWAN. Couple things that we've improved, because it was a custom design, we added some capabilities and features to it. The two major features we added were the surge and reverse polarity protection. One of the issues you have is this is going to be running outside where you have lightning, so you have to be able to basically have surge protection from EMI through lightning. And again, we're connecting in this case, a 16 gauge wire terminal block, and we didn't want to have a chance of blowing the camera devices. So this was developed, again, it was a custom design developed with EtherWAN, and while they did the electronics, they added our features. We put it into an IP67 case, as you can see, enclosure, as you can see on the side. So today, this is what a Cat5 implementation looks like. As you can see, you have the GS2 talking to an EPM, which is fundamentally surge protection, going across a Cat5 cable through 2 repeaters to a junction box, which is the surge protection for the camera, which is on the luminaire arm or mask arm. And again, these are the issues with doing this. First of all, you have 4 additional connections that have to be done and have to be basically watertight. Number 2, the repeaters can never be more than 300 feet from each other. That's not a GRIDSMART spec, that's an industry Ethernet spec. And finally, the total distance between the camera and the processor can never exceed 900 feet. Again, that's an Ethernet spec. It has nothing to do with GRIDSMART. So the other issues you have with running Cat5, you have grounding loops. Giving the longer the distance, the more chance you have for ground loops. And finally, the longer the distance, the greater the chance you have for noise. By moving to fiber, what do we get here? With the SMARTMOUNT2025, first of all you have to do is pull 1 composite fiber cable. It is indoor-outdoor rated. It's multi-mode OM3 with 4 strands. Why do we have 4 strands? We have 100% redundancy, so if there is a problem with one of the strands, you don't have to pull a new cable. So we actually have, like I said, 100% redundancy. And finally, we have 16 gauge power and ground for the PoE, which basically powers the IP camera. Then you add 2 media converters. These are identical media converters with different mounting hardware. One mounts to the bottom of the SMARTMOUNT kit. The other mounts to the side of the traffic cabinet. So that is how you move from a Cat5 to basically a fiber system at GRIDSMART. So the advantages of SMARTMOUNT2025 compared to our Cat5e implementation. It's 900 feet versus 2,000. Our fiber is designed to run at 2,000 feet. The 100 megabits, just so everybody know, 100 megabits multimode fiber has a distance of over 6,000 feet, okay? For voltage loss on a 16 gauge wire, we limited the distance to 2,000 feet. Second, so again, that is the distance from the GS2 to the camera. Again, 2,000 feet maximum. The noise immunity. You don't have power lines, you don't have LED luminaires, you don't have lightning strikes. And actually, one place we actually had an electric train that would put out so much noise that it would crash the system. So fundamentally, this removes all noise, both RFI and EMI noise sources. Finally, it eliminates ground loops through the optical isolation. So you don't have to worry about there's no electrical connection between the Ethernet transmit and receive between the GS2 and the camera. So you don't have to worry about ground loops, which is always a pain. And again, ground loops are, like environmental, can change based on the environment, different rust, water in the soil, everything else. So we eliminate the ground loop problem. little traffic up there. Power to the camera, power over Ethernet, power to the camera, however you want to look at it. Fundamentally today, if you're running a Cat 5e, you're running the power on 224 gauge wires. At 900 feet, that has a total resistance of 11.5 ohms. When you do the math, as I showed you down below with a 48 volt power supply, you get about 32 volts to the camera. And that 32 volts of the camera then is both for the heating element and the IP camera. Again, our cameras have a heating element for the people who live up north. So now you have basically 32 volts going to the camera. With the 16 gauge wire at 1,000 feet, you can go through the math again. You can see we now get 41 volts up to the IP camera. So fundamentally, the heating element can get higher. Even at 2,000 feet with 16 gauge wire, you have 36 volts at the IP camera. Just to let everybody know, if you ever wanted to run it a mile, if somebody's strong enough to pull 12 gauge wire, you can literally pull 12 gauge wire 5,000 feet, and your camera voltage still exceeds the power over Ethernet Cat 5. Our system today, our enclosure today, does not support the 12 gauge 5,000 feet. I want everybody to know we are limited to 2,000 feet. But I just wanted to give you guys an idea of basically the electronics behind it for the power. Okay, this is the SMARTMOUNT 2025 kit. As you can see, if you ever looked at this compared to the SMARTMOUNT kit, the only thing our difference is the inclusion of the two media converters. This one goes in the cabinet, the traffic cabinet. This one here goes at the bottom of the pole, as you can see the difference in mounting hardware. Also, it's very important to know you have to order the cable separately. So the SMARTMOUNT 2025, when you order it, it does not include the fiber cable. But again, if you look at a SMARTMOUNT kit, the EPM is replaced with a media converter, and the junction box at the bottom of the pole is replaced with a media converter. Everything else within the system remains the same, including the cables that go from the processor to the media converter and from the camera to the media converter. Same technology, same stuff. Now, one of the things that we did, or we realized early on in the fiber program, was termination. So one of the things that we did, we worked with AFL, and we'll go through that a little bit more, but what we did was develop a toolkit or a case. The case, believe it or not, functions both as a case to carry the tools, as you can see, and it functions as a workspace that can be either used up in the bucket truck or down at the cabinet. And what's really nice about this is, you can see right here, this is the cleaver that is from AFL. It is permanently mounted. And then what you do is on each side, you have clamps that you put the fiber cable through. So you're now able to connect the fiber cable, then have your hands free. Both hands are literally free to actually do the termination. And all the tools that you need to do the termination are here in the back end. And when you're done, you fold it up and you carry it like a briefcase. So again, our FASTConnect toolkit, its carrying case also opens up or functions as a working surface. Next, this is it's a show of the tools in here. As you can see, you got a cable ring cutter, cleaners, you got the cleaver, which the wire strippers, the pen. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the AFL optical power meter. Because again, this is a closed system, we have been able to characterize everything in the system, and we built an attenuation model for worst case. So after you do a termination, if you measure anything greater than minus 23 dB loss, that means you did not have what we call an optimal termination, and you re-terminate. What's really good about this is never a marginal thing. 23 dB or less, you've got a great termination. Anything above it, you re-terminate. And that's what the optical power meter from AFL does. It lets you basically confirm the quality of your termination. If anybody wants to look at more, these are the links to all the AFL tools that's in our toolkit. Like I said, you got the cleaver, the power meter, the FASTConnect connectors, and then of course the one-click cleaner. So I'm going to give you a little, I guess, GRIDSMART history. In 2018, we kicked off a joint development program for the fiber technology with both AFL and EtherWAN. So we spent a year working with them, developing the technology. In 2019, we started conducting a very diversified field trial sites. And when I say diversified, I mean we were in Arizona, we were in Canada, we were in Wisconsin, we were in Texas, we were in New York, we were in Georgia. So what we did was get as much, for lack of a better word, as diverse environmental conditions as possible, anywhere from the frigid Canadians to the deserts of Arizona. I mean, basically what we did. So we spent 2019 conducting field trials to basically prove the technology met the environmental of our industry, requirements of our industry. In early 2020, we started GRIDSMART customer installations, which means the FAE actually had to do the installation. So what we've done is we used the first half of 2020 to basically refine and finalize the installation procedure. So now we've been, what, 3-4 months of actually doing field installations with the FAEs, taking that feedback and refining the installation procedure. Now the goal is in late 2020, or basically at Intersect, is kick off a certification class. The certification class then will include the toolkit, will definitely include the FASTConnect toolkit, and then after you go through the certification class, you will then be certified to install the SMARTMOUNT2025. And again, this will be, the FAEs will do the training regionally for all of our contractors and customers. That's a pretty much overview of it. I guess we can open this up for questions now.
Thanks, Carl.
Yes.
We do have a few questions that I think will have some great debate. The first one is from Derek. He has a good question. Custom cable sounds expensive and not readily available for repairs. What is GRIDSMART doing to minimize that? Also, cable would be assumed sole source, which can get difficult with certain funding sources.
Well, first of all, it's not going to be sole sourced, it's dual sourced. The cable is actually dual sourced. And because what we were able to do was multi-mode, you could say that could become a problem, but by having it sourced, customized and sourced, we now know the installation will go smoothly through via a procedure because we know it's a multi-mode, we know the distance of the cable, we know it's 16 gauge wire, it's only one wire. I mean, it's only 16 gauge wire, so you have the power. Also, I'm not sure where you would be able to find a single wire in the open market that met our requirements. That's the other thing. I'm not sure how you would, I'm not sure how many 4-wire multi-mode OM3 16 gauge single cables out there. Again, you remember the GRIDSMART philosophy, one cable. So you're only pulling one cable from the processor to the camera.
Perfect, thank you, Carl. DMC says, great question from Derek, the one you just answered. I'm wondering about availability and how quickly it can be attained.
I'm sorry, say that again?
DMC is wondering about availability, I assume, of the cable and how quickly it can be obtained. So maybe you and Michael would both like to chat about that.
Yeah, I'll let Michael answer, but the cables are in stock with our distributor and it's basically in stock now. Michael?
Yes, this is Michael with FL. We worked with GRIDSMART, to set up warehousing where we inventory the cable to be able to deliver it, in the expected lead time for it.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. DMC also had another question about the toolkit, which, Carl, I don't know if you know this offhand. We may have to respond after the presentation is over, but he's asking about the dimensions of the toolkit.
Yeah, something, I know it's 20 pounds. I don't know, Matt Greeno's on the line. Matt, do you know off the top of your head the size of the toolkit? I know you probably have one in your office. I guess not.
DM, what we'll do is
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know the exact measurements. I was trying to look that up while we were doing the webinar, and I'm having trouble finding the drawings. But I would, just as an estimate, you know, I would say it's about 16 inches by 18 inches, or 14 by 16, something like that, and about 3 inches thick. Again, I think a laptop, you know, type satchel or case, it's, you know, probably a little bit smaller than your typical little laptop bag. And it's got a carrying strap, so it's, you know, it's pretty easy to, you know, put on your shoulder and take it up in the bucket truck. And then the way it folds out, it actually slides over the edge of the bucket truck and clamps to the ledge of the bucket to secure it while you're, you can also secure the cable on either side as it comes into the little work surface where the cleaver and all your tools are. So it actually makes a really nice, sturdy work surface.
Thank you, Matt, for that elaboration. We do have another question about the toolkit. Can it be used for single mode fiber termination?
Yes.
Easy enough. Thank you, Kevin, for that question. We have a question from Dan. What would the outside diameter of the fiber/power cable be?
Michael, do you know that off the top of your head? I know it's not a lot bigger than a Cat 5. I
Can't
just
right
don't
now.
remember off the top of my head. Do you remember, Michael?
It's 0.42 or 10.7 millimeters.
Perfect. Thank you. Moving on, Nathan asks, how long will the certification last?
The class?
Just like, yeah, just like all our other trainings and certification. I mean, the installers will be trained on GRIDSMART as a basis, and if they haven't installed and supported and configured GRIDSMART in the past, we would start with the GRIDSMART foundations. Best practices that are in the Ethernet Cat 5e solutions still apply to the fiber solution. So, you know, we want to make sure everybody has a good foundation on that. Then we would do the fiber certification. If you're doing installs, we don't expect, you know, you to keep up, hours of training to keep your certification. So, I mean, once you're trained, you'll receive the certification, you'll receive, you know, GRIDSMART support when you need it. And so, no, there's no term limit for the certification.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. We do have a couple of questions in the chat regarding this webinar today and its recording. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but we will be sending up a follow-up email to everyone that's in attendance with resource links, a link to Carl's presentation, and a link to today's recording. So if you wanted to use that for training purposes, you may.
The other thing is, like, I see this one question about, I'd like to do this with their team. I'd be happy to do this presentation, a webinar for your team, just your guys. I mean, I'm sitting in my office here, kind of bored out of my mind anyway, so I wouldn't have no problem doing a webinar for your teams, for your company or your teams.
I see that question too, Carl, from Mr. Mansour. If you'd like to email Carl directly, you do see his contact information there. So why don't you just reach out to Carl and schedule that with him? He said he'd be happy to help you all out. Moving on, we have a question from Donald. What materials were used to construct the outside of the FASTConnect toolkit? As we should not use metallic devices on the outside of our buckets, is this a concern?
No, we took that into account, and you shouldn't have a problem. It is not metallic. I can tell you that. Matt, do you know what the material exactly is, or do we have to get Tracy to answer that? I know it's not conductive.
Yeah, we'll have to get Tracy to. I don't know what the final material is at this point.
But we did take the fact that we don't want anybody to get, conductive material on the bucket truck.
Thank you. From Kevin, with this new technology, are there plans to add a third camera connection / port to a GS2 processor?
Not at this time.
Moving on from Kevin, when do you know a fiber connection is necessary? Only after a Cat5 installation fails?
No, I mean, that's definitely one reason. One, if you're exceeding 900 feet, or you can't put repeaters in every 300 feet. So right there, you've got what I call the physical limitations. The other thing is if you're near high power lines. So if you're up at the camera and you're getting shocked, you're close to high power lines, you're probably going to have a noise problem. So so those are the two major ways, but in general, this is just me speaking. As you get over 300 feet, it's hard not to go to fiber, given how the costs converge and the superior connectivity of a fiber loop. So it's very hard for me to say anything on over 300 feet should not be evaluated for fiber, and if possible, implemented, because it just eliminates so many problems.
Thank you, Carl. Next, can we pull the fiber in tight places?
I'm going to turn this over to Michael Olson at AFL, because there's a bending radius that I don't remember off the top of my head. Michael, do you remember what that is?
The cable is rated to be pulled at 600 pounds. When we say tight places, a couple industry standards recommend a 40% fill rate. So you probably want about a 1-inch conduit, but the 90s, the amount of 90s, and the couplers being in pretty good shape are some factors that you want to consider when pulling it in. But it is rated for 600 pounds, and as far as maintaining the integrity, it is designed to be pulled in tight places.
Thank you, Michael. Next, from Mark, when will the toolkit be available?
Two-part question. The tools from AFL are available now. We are in the final stages of basically the box, the case, right? The work area. Matt, do you know off the top of your head? But I know we're in the final stages of that, and it's supposed to be available with the certification program.
Right. So, I mean, the official launch will be at Intersect, which is in October in Knoxville, and you can kind of keep up to date on that at intersectconference.com. But as far as the toolkit with the the case and everything together, we're finalizing all the engineering and the designing, all that. We've gone through several prototypes, and all of the FAEs will be receiving one in the next couple of months or so. So if you're with your FAE and want to take a look at the entire kit, they should be able to kind of show you what you would be getting.
But the tools from AFL are available today. Michael, what are the lead times on those?
Typically stock to 2 weeks.
Stock to 2 weeks. Okay.
Alrighty, the next from Marty. We would like to see a webinar showing the cable and termination. So that's going to be an elaboration on training, guys.
Yes, that is being planned. Actually, this is being planned for the Intersect boot camps, and I believe that kicks off in July, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct,
Kristen?
Carl.
Huh?
That is correct, Carl. So we will also include some information in there about upcoming events. As Carl mentioned, Intersect Boot Camp is where we're taking Intersect on the road. We plan to go into more in-depth training of how to actually terminate the cable at those boot camps. So that'll be where you first see this. Alrighty, moving on. Have we installed SmartMount 2025 in Florida?
No.
No. we have it will be going through the product approval process, or it is currently.
Alrighty, moving on. Does this use 2 fibers full duplex?
Yes. That's why we have 4 in case you have a break in one, you don't have to pull it, but yes, it's full duplex, 2 fibers. And that's why the customized composite cable has 4 fibers in it. So we have 100% redundancy.
Thank you. Michael, you already answered this one, but maybe just to nail it home, how strong is the fiber cable and what is the bending radius?
The bend radius, during installation procedures is 6.3 inches. The bend radius for long-term once it's stored is 4.2. The cable's been tested to GR409, it's UL rated, ICEA, but it is good for 600 pounds pulling.
Perfect, thank you. Orlando has a question. Is the cable jacket able to hold up to rodents chewing on it, and or does it have a deterrent?
It's kind of a loaded question. There is no cable jacket that holds up to rodents chewing on it. Even if you use an armored cable with a metallic sheath, they will still chew through it. It's the nature of what rodents do. This particular cable design does not have a rodent deterrent in it. However, from a manufacturing position, that is something we can offer. I don't know if, I haven't talked with GRIDSMART about it, but from a manufacturing perspective, it is available.
Thank you, Michael. We have an anonymous question submitted. So with 2,000 distance from camera to processor, how do you see these cameras being used? For example, could they be used for ramp queuing or RR advanced warning?
We still see the cameras being used. Doesn't change the function of the camera. It's really designed for the large intersection. So it'll still do the basic functions that we do. It does basically detection, it does data, and it will let you use streams. So the function of the camera hasn't changed at all. It just lets you move the camera further away in some of these large intersections where you don't have, for lack of a better word, over 300 feet before you have a pull box, or some of it does. So it just takes the existing functions of the camera today and lets you put them in much greater distance at a much higher reliability.
Perfect, thank you.
One point I want to add, if you notice, there is absolutely no difference between the GS2 and the processor and all that between a Cat5 and a fiber. It's the exact same products. There's nothing has changed. It's literally just the cable and the media converters are replaced, the junction box, the EPN, and the fiber, and the Cat5e, I'm sorry. So nothing has changed. So functionality, nothing changes.
Perfect. We have a question from Kevin. Is the 2025 setup going to be standard, or will the Cat5e installations continue to be available?
The Cat5e installations will still be available for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Michael has another question. Are you splicing or connecting SoCs?
We are, okay. We are terminating. We are definitely not splicing. We are terminating, period. The cable's a solid, you have to be careful here too. I always use the term, if you miss by an inch, you miss by a mile. So when you order the fiber cable, you have to have the right distance, because we are not support splicing. We are only terminating to the connectors.
Michael,
But
did you want to elaborate on that?
It's a field installable connector or mechanical splice. We didn't look at doing a splice on connector, but with that method, it requires capital investment for a fusion splicer. So for the application and the ease of termination, with all the solutions considered, this was we found the easiest and the most efficient method without a large capital expense.
Thank you. Alrighty, next question. What's the cost difference between Cat5 versus fiber?
It's intersection dependent, depending on length. What you need to do is get with your FA and your regional sales managers, but I can just tell you, the longer the distance, the more the cost of them converge. But again, it's very intersect dependent, depending on the distance, the number of repeaters, et cetera. So the best way to answer that question is working with your FAE to do a site survey and the regional sales manager.
And Zahid, you can visit our website, gridsmart.com, to figure out who your regional sales manager is, or reach out to us, marketing@gridsmart.com, and we'd be happy to connect you to the right person. Next from Derek, will the media converters be available separately so existing intersections could be upgraded?
What we have is, and again, the regional sales manager will work with you, but the answer is we have what we call a retrofit program. So we have an existing intersection you want to retrofit towards from Cat5 to fiber. We have that program. You work with your regional sales manager, and it does exist.
Perfect. From Diem, what is the cable weight for a max 2000 distance run from GS2 to camera, assuming requirement of one consistent run?
Michael, help me here. What is it? 1,000?
I don't know the exact weight. You know, just the weight on the cable itself is 77 pounds per 1,000 feet, and the spool, I don't have the exact weight on it. It would not be. I would estimate between, 175 to 200 pounds.
We have installed this, and the FAEs are able to basically do it manually. It didn't require special equipment.
Thank you. From Richard, are the media converters standard EtherWAN products?
No. They were developed by EtherN using their technology, but they've been customized to support the GRIDSMART system.
Thank you. From Marty, the issue is a proprietary cable to GRIDSMART and having to terminate in the field. So not really a question, but more of a comment. Did you want to?
I agree. I agree with you 100%. That was the problem when we started looking at implementing fiber. It was exactly that. And that's why we got on board early with AFL. That's why we developed the toolkit, the workbench, and everything else. I agree with you 100%. But the advantage is, in my opinion, since I'm responsible for support, the advantages of having a closed system with a custom cable, in my mind, outweigh the advantages of having an open cable. One, we wanted only one cable. Two, I wanted redundancy. And three, I wanted to be able to build an attenuation model that we could basically, with one measurement, confirm if we had a good termination or not. So the advantage one with a proprietary cable just seemed to outweigh the advantages of having, if you could find one, what I call a non-proprietary cable. Again, it's an opinion.
Alrighty, and lastly, it's just simply a request, and we've had a few of these coming in for a webinar on how to connect the cables. So some people are very interested in additional training, and as we've said, we will follow up this email with some resources and some helpful links, and we'll be launching training for SmartMount 2025 installation at Intersect in October of this year. From Diem, is the cost of the system being sold at the same rate nationwide?
Yes.
Alrighty. Looks like, I'm just looking here, we had a couple of questions come into the chat, so I want to make sure that we answered all of those. It looks like most of them have. Kind of a final call for questions. We do have a little bit more time, so if you want to keep them coming in, please do. One from Chris just came in. I assume the standard fiber splicing would be required if a long run is damaged.
Yeah, I'm going to let Michael over at AFL answer that. My opinion is, if you don't have the equipment, the worst case is it's a 2,000-foot cable. I would pull the cable. But again, Michael, I don't know what it takes to do splicing, so I'll let you answer that, what the cost of the equipment and all that is. But I would just pull a cable.
Just from a technical perspective, if it's damaged, you do have the option to repair the damage, put a splice point in it. But there are a lot of factors to consider with that. If you've got enough slack, do you have a location to manage the splice point? Normally under these circumstances, with it not exceeding 2,000 feet, it would be the best practice to pull a new cable. It would probably be the quickest time-wise. It would be, the most sustainable as far as long-term. You're kind of adding more pain points by putting a splice in line there, and then it would require some specialized tools. So I think it would be a best practice to pull one in based on time, cost, all things considered.
Thank you. From Daryl, does the power limiting cable, is it shielded and does it have a drain wire?
No, it is not shielded. It does not need a drain wire. The drain wire is used to protect the Ethernet signals, which in this case are fiber, which are optical. So you don't need the shield/drain wire.
Perfect. Someone asks, during grounding and electrical storms, can you briefly go over the wiring again?
Yes, it's relatively simple here. The media converter has a surge protection in it. So what you do is that is set up to be grounded on both the traffic cabinet and on basically the mask arm where the camera is. So what you're doing here is you're grounding the surge protections. You don't have to ground now anymore for shielding or for the electrical, for what I call the AC or the Ethernet signals. You're only now grounding for the surge protections in the median converter. So it's a simple, same thing, 10 gauge wire at the traffic cabinet to ground, and then you ground at the pole the same way you did with the Cat 5e. But again, you're only grounding now for surge protection, a place for that energy to go to ground. You're no longer grounding for shielding or to protect the Ethernet signals.
We have one in from Derek. Is the cable 600 volt rated?
Michael?
Ooh. Yeah, I would have to defer to you for that on that one, Carl. I know you did some calculations, for current and amperage for the 16 gauge.
Yeah.
But
I'll need to look on that, to be honest with you. I'll need to look. I know it's a 16 gauge, and I just don't, off the top of my head, remember why. I don't know off the top of my head. I was hoping you knew, Michael, but I also don't know that one off the top of my head.
Derek, you have Carl's contact information there. So if that's a question that you need answered, just go ahead and email Carl directly. And once he finds that data, he can get it over to you. Thank you guys so much for all of your great questions coming in. We do have a little bit more time. So if you have any more, please go ahead and submit them in the Q&A now. It's not every day that we have Carl and Michael and Derek all on the line. So please go ahead and submit your questions now. Marvin has one. Is there a troubleshooting manual on the device?
Yes, well, actually there's a couple of things, but the major thing we have, because again, it's a closed system, we have a very, very detailed installation procedure that basically would serve as a troubleshooting guide. It has the information or where to look and where the problems are. But the good news is, if you go through the installation procedure, you'll know there are different steps where you do tests along the way. So that's all incorporated into the what I call the installation procedure or the installation guide.
All right, whoever Anonymous is, they've got jokes and they're asking how much fiber does it take for a healthy diet? I don't know if Carl, Michael, or Derek are qualified to answer that question.
Well, the truth of the matter is I have a very low fiber diet, so I'm probably not the right person to ask.
Depends on whose fiber it is.
There you go, Michael. Dan has a question. Is the FASTMount toolkit required for termination of the fiber strands?
Yes.
No, it does not require a fan out.
No.
The type
Michael,
buffer
please.
cable. Yeah.
Michael, please.
That's a great question. If you're familiar with fiber, you use a fan out kit on a loose tube cable, and they can be a pain in the butt. But we went with a a tight buffer cable to eliminate the use of a fan-out kit. Carl had actually first looked
Oh,
at
no,
the
I'm
Bluetooth
sorry.
cable and
No, I misread the question. You're absolutely right. Our first time around, we tried a fan-out kit, and that's why we redefined it without it. I'm sorry. I thought that said toolkit. My bad.
so no need to use a fan-out kit.
No, but there is a need to use our termination kit or toolkit.
Yes.
And as Carl stated earlier, we will have links to the AFL site for all of the items within the FASTConnect toolkit when we send out the resources link after this presentation. Just a couple more minutes here will allow you guys to submit your questions. If you don't get them in today, go ahead and jot down Carl's contact information. We're all working remotely at this time, so he's got a lot of free time on his hands, and he'd love to get with you guys on SmartMount 2025.
Thank you, Kristen.
Mr. Mansour says thank you and goodbye, everybody. So Dan says he uses AFL fast mount connectors and he thinks they're awesome. So thanks, Michael, for that.
Actually, after evaluating a bunch on the market, so do I. I agree with you, Dan.
Kevin asks about the event in October. Are we still planning on moving forward with it? Kevin, I assume that you are asking about Intersect. The answer is yes. We will be sending out an email about how to register for that event in the coming days. Even if we can't do it on site as we normally do in Knoxville, we will be going digital with the event. We will still have digital training sessions that will qualify for TART points and all of the good stuff that you normally get at Intersect, but it will all be done digitally.
You know, just to add one thing to the comment about the connectors there were a couple connectors considered. You know, the factors that led to using the AFL FASTConnects were, you know, the reliability when we temperature cycled them in the environmental chamber. We got good, consistent results. Also the fact that it doesn't require any proprietary tools to put the connectors on. And then also if you do terminate one and you don't get a good connection, you have the ability to remove the connector and terminate it again. So it's not a one-time use connector. So if you put it on there, it doesn't test out properly, you release it, re-terminate it again. So you can use a connector a couple of times.
And like Michael said, all of that will be covered in great detail in the certification class that you'll take. This is all gone in great detail. Oh, the other nice thing about AFL, by the way, and their products is their apps lab is only 2 hours from GRIDSMART Knoxville, which has come in handy during the development. That's the other thing. So if we ever do have any problems, their reliability and failure analysis lab is literally a 2-hour drive from Knoxville, which turned out to be during the development very, very useful. We learned a lot.
Great. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up, everyone. Again, we want to thank you for attending today's webinar. And we look forward to sharing more with you as we progress with SmartMount 2025. We will follow up with that resources email for you. If you attended today's webinar, we'll make sure to add you to the list for any SmartMount 2025 communications so that you can learn more about our training program. Thank you all and have a wonderful afternoon.